Hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Wellness Dojo Podcast, where we bring real solutions to real health and wellness problems. In today's episode, we're talking about why is it so hard to start and why is it so hard to stick to something even when it's so important to you. I hope you're able to take some value from this episode, and let's get into it. All right, we're live.
We're live.
Episode number 1.
It's going down.
It's going down. I'm actually genuinely very excited to be doing this today.
Same here.
Yeah, and I think I'm excited mostly because the topic that we're choosing to start with is one that's, I think, really valuable and really impactful right out of the gate.
Yeah, I'd say so. So what we're going to talk about today is this paradox about how hard it is to start something, even though that something is really good for us and it's something that we want. But there's a lot of resistance to overcome when starting something. So we're going to delve into why that might be and how you can overcome it. So that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. And then once you've started something, once you've overcome that challenge, how hard it is to actually maintain whatever that new habit or lifestyle change is.
Yeah.
Right. So it's hard not only to start, but then, well, here's the good news. It doesn't get easier. It's just, even to maintain. But I think a lot of it is perspective. A lot of it's mindset. A lot of it is perhaps internal and self-talk. Of course, there's always external factors, and there's always going to be, things to overcome in your external environment too. And it's going to be a combination of those two things. But we're really going to talk about why it's so hard to get started. And Kyle and I, we're very real, and we're always trying to adapt to new habits and do things ourselves. And we know it's not easy. And we fall off. Kyle posts about it on social media all the time. I fell off. Here's why. And so... Well,
not all. I don't fall off that often. I mean, come on. You're making me sound a little bit...
Yeah, but so we have, we're going to be honest and talk about what works for us too and what doesn't, and some of the pitfalls and how to overcome it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, when we're on this topic of starting and stopping something, this is across the board. A struggle with people. This is across the board something that people deal with, whether you're looking at starting a new fitness regimen, a new diet, whether we're talking about taking medications on a consistent basis. These are things that people struggle with when
playing guitar, playing piano,
anything.
Whatever.
Learning something new, or I've got 3 kids and I see them all the time, and it's hard sometimes when they're doing something new, getting back into that back to school habit, even all those things. This is something that I think can be useful across the board for people. And so I'm excited to dive in.
Awesome. Well, why don't you keep that energy going and let's dive in.
Okay. So, let's first talk about why do we think it's so difficult for people to start something? Why is that such a difficult thing? And for me, working with various clients, a lot of times what ends up coming up when you start digging a little bit deeper is there's actually a fear of starting. And that might sound silly because oftentimes people are super motivated at the beginning, right? That motivation is something that is always there at the beginning of that process. I'm excited to start my new workouts. I'm excited to get results. I'm excited to do this. But why then, when it comes to Monday morning, when you're going to start, is there still that resistance pulling you back? A lot of people, it's fear, right? I don't know have you ever experienced that where you felt like you were going to start something, but then you had fear holding you back?
Well, yeah, always the concept of starting something and idealizing what you can become later down the line is really tantalizing, and that certainly gets the dopamine going. But your first 5:30 a.m. run, it's a very different feeling.
Oh man, okay, so a couple months back when the weather was starting to get nice, Dr. Rai was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go do some hill runs. You should join me for some hill runs." And I hadn't run in a year, probably. I didn't run probably all through COVID because, first of all, I hate running just as a general thing. But I was like, yep, I got to do it. Let's start. I know I need to get my cardio going back. And yeah, so then we met up and we did it. But I was genuinely afraid of starting that, of going and doing that. And there was a lot of different things I was afraid of at that time. I was afraid that maybe I wouldn't be able to keep up, and what's he going to think, and am I going to look bad? But also there was that fear that I think a lot of people experience, that almost like a cycle of fear of I've tried to start this before, and I've stopped, or I feel like I've failed before doing this.
Yeah.
And that can create a lot of fear in somebody who is trying to just start something, because that when you start something, when you're so excited, you're so motivated, you start working towards it. When you stop, that can be a painful experience for a lot of people. Like that, it feels a lot like failure, even though in the real grand scheme of things, in the macro, it's not failure, but it can feel like failure. And for a lot of people, I think that does play into that resistance when first starting out.
Yeah, and some of the things that you mentioned there was like in line with fear when you were experiencing it that moment. It sounded like it actually had a lot to do with pride. Like, am I right in that? Because it was something about how's this gonna look, and am I gonna fail and all that. And that's a big one too. Is people's personal pride. The thought of something being embarrassing, I think goes along with failure. And wow, is embarrassment ever a strong sentiment and emotion that you can have? And it's something that's what the brain always goes back and reminds you of. That's why we have these cringeworthy moments of ourselves, like while we're alone in our thoughts. Well, I certainly do, and my brain always reminds me of these embarrassing moments. And what I've come to realize is my mind is actually trying to do me a favor. What it's really doing at its core is saying, just don't do that again. So I'm going to remind you of it so you don't do it again. But if you identify with it, you just kind of can get caught up in the embarrassment and in the fear of those memories. But I kind of redefine it and say, well, it's just trying to get me not to do it again. It's a self-preservation thing. So yes, thank you, brain. Thank you for reminding me. No, I will not do that or say that at a party again. Yeah. And so, you can kind of redefine it like that too.
Yeah, and I think that is a really big part of this conversation, because when you look at, a lot of people here who, through this past year and a half to 2 years where gyms have been opening and closing too, that makes it really difficult for people to start, because for a lot of people, when, just going to the gym to begin with is a very scary thing for those reasons. They're afraid of their insecurities coming to the surface. They're afraid that they're going to look silly. They're afraid they're going to go in there and just not know what to do, and people are going to be looking and going, what the hell are they doing? Right? That's a genuine fear that many, many people have. And so when you look at that, whether it's, like I say, going to the gym, starting an exercise routine, joining a new fitness class, or maybe it's starting a new diet and like joining a new community or anything like that, I think there's always that level of, what if I look like an idiot? Right?
Yeah. And there's the pride and the embarrassment again. Right. So I just want to mention that again, because if there's any listeners out there self-reflecting, is that in you? And have you realized that that's a really a big part of what it is? And that's it's not an easy one to overcome either.
No.
Those sentiments. And that's why it's important when you do have moments in your life where you should feel prideful, that you allow yourself to feel that as well, because we certainly do good on allowing ourselves to feel embarrassed or be worried about that. But you have to give yourself, it's almost like the permission after accomplishments, after a good workout, after a good work week, after a tough conversation with your significant other that you didn't want to have but you had anyway, like allow yourself to feel pride for that. And then what you do is you can look back and say, well, I'm counteracting this idea that I should feel shameful or embarrassed by all of these pieces of evidence that I actually have a lot to be prideful of too. And I'm sure if you self-reflect, you've overcome a lot more than you realize. Even in just the past week, I bet you've overcome a lot more than you realize. So it's just important to keep reminding yourself of that, because the mind, it seems to have this negative skew. I've been thinking about this for a long time. It's like, that's why you don't pump up like the toxic positivity, but you do sometimes need to think positively, because the mind just can have this funny negative angle to it that's always kind of there, that you have to be aware of and learn to overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And I think also another thing that can be really helpful, especially when you are starting something new or trying to start something new, if you do have that fear of like, I find my mind is very like self-isolating in itself, where it's like it thinks like I'm the only one experiencing this at this moment.
Yes.
And so I think it's also important that when you look at that, you can go into a gym. The gym reopens and you're like, okay, it's time to get back, but I haven't been there in 6 months and I'm worried about what people are going to think. Well, probably every other person who's in there with you is probably having some level of the same thought of like, okay, I'm going back. You know, it might be somebody who's very experienced at the gym, but they also haven't been at the gym. They've been doing home workouts and they're worried, oh, what if my bench press isn't the same PR as it was before, right? Everybody is experiencing that same thing. And I think that's an important thing too, because when you're going into a space like that, or like I say, it could be anything. It could be joining a sport. It could be starting a diet, whatever the case might be. But you're not alone in that experience and you're not alone in that feeling. And for me anyways, and for a lot of the people that I've spoken to about it, that's a big piece of that puzzle too. It's just knowing that like, okay, this is a normal feeling for me to have, and it's a normal part of this process. Everybody experiences this.
Yep, exactly. And that's one of the ways to overcome that feeling of self-isolation. Because you can start to really spin that narrative very quickly. It's kind of like that. It's that individualistic, victim-like narrative that also the mind tends to create, and it's very easy to get caught up in that. So it's important to remind yourself that even the person who has 7% body fat, they're ashamed maybe that they don't have 3% because they're not in competition. Like it just goes, it's endless, really.
It is.
And so we're all human. We're all going through similar struggles, and and then we all have then our duty to not try to judge people too harshly as well in the gym. So something else that I was thinking about when it comes to difficulty starting is this concept that when you're about to embark on some sort of a big journey, let's just stick to health right now, some sort of a big health journey. Something that causes trepidation is the unknown. And so the unknown is something that it's very intimidating, right? We like things laid out. And when we start a course, we like to see the syllabus. When we go to a restaurant, we like to see the menu. We love things just kind of categorized and boxed. But some of these journeys, you don't exactly know how it's going to go. And I think in your heart of hearts, you start to think, well, what if it's going to be even harder than I think? Like, I think it's going to be tough and I'm ready for it, but gosh, what if it's even harder, and what if I can't do it? And that's kind of the fear of the unknown, the great unknown that keeps people from starting in and of itself. Unknown it's a source of stress. We like to have resources at the ready. We like to have confidence. We like to have plans that alleviate stress. Unknown augments it, right? So that's, if you're going into something like, thank goodness these days we can research things on the internet. Sometimes there's just so much conflicting information out there, so it is tough. But that's why we would obviously suggest going and seeing a health professional or a certified trainer or something like that to really help you along and start to fill in the blanks of the unknowns. Because if the way that you start to dissipate the unknowns is you take away, don't look at where you're at right now and that peak pinnacle where you want to be. Look at it for a second because it's fun, but don't look at it too hard, because that gap between where you are and where you want to be can be vast. And you just, instead of like looking too far to the horizon, just kind of look down the block first and just see what that first step is. And I think you probably agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, even if you speak to a health professional, even if you speak to Dr. Riley or you speak to myself, like there's still a level of unknown that's there. And, eventually you just have to start. Like, I know that seems like
it is a leap. You have to take leap.
Yeah, you have to take
and
that
it is scary.
Leap. You have to be willing to try something. You have to be willing to trust in a person or a process and just see and just know that is also a part of that process, right? Like, the reason we've talked about why starting is scary and stuff like that, but we haven't talked yet about actually like why starting is important, right? Like why is starting so important? Because starting helps you learn, right? Unless you actually go and you just do it, unless you take that first step into the gym and pick up that first weight or have that first consultation with that trainer that's going to help you, guide you in the right direction. Unless you do those things, you'll never know if it's going to work or not. Right. So you got to start, right?
Yep, exactly. And that's what I was saying before is is look at other transferable places in life that you have started. I'm sure you've gone to a job interview that you were afraid to go to, and starting that new job, and that was scary, and starting that new relationship at one point was scary. Go back and see, no, I've done this in other aspects of life. I can do this with health too. I can get started. I've proven it to myself.
Yeah, and you and I were talking about this before we went on the air here, and back into martial arts, right? You learn a technique. Like you and I had an instructor who he didn't shy away from brutal honesty. I would say.
Yeah, I was gonna say criticism.
Yeah, constructive criticism, quote unquote. But that was a good exercise, at least for me, and I'm sure you would agree, of just like working towards something, trying something, but then like knowing that trying is a big part of that process, right? It's like, I remember kicks that we had to learn, like jumping, spinning kicks. And I was like, I would work on it all week long for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And I'd be like, so excited to go and show him and be like, okay, I got this. He's going to praise me. And I would show him, he's like, not yet. It still looks horrible.
Oh, memories.
Yeah. Right. And so it was like, okay, back to the drawing board, but it was devastating. Right. And that's kind of circles a little bit back to that cycle of fear, as well as the next time you go to start that next thing, learn that next technique, or start that next journey onto something, your brain, like you said, reminds you of that. And that's where that fear can come in. But until you actually start and try, you never know what that journey is going to entail. You never know what you're going to get from it, but you also never know what kind of feedback you're going to get from that process either, right? It almost always, trying something, starting something will almost always make you stronger in the end, one way or another.
Yep, that's right. And that's another one to remind yourself of when reflecting on things that you've done previously is, when have I tried and really truly regretted it? Yeah. And there might be some of those moments peppered into the memory about the grief, embarrassment, and things like that. But overwhelmingly, the answer is no. I'm happy. I tried. Yeah, I learned a lot. I'm happy I did it. There was some takeaways from it, and at least I can say that I tried.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think I've ever done something where at the end I wasn't able to at least reflect on it and say, okay, I got something from this. Regardless if it was like a devastating failure, it was like I got something from this experience that I can now take forwards. But that also takes some self-awareness, and really it takes an ability to just stop and reflect. And reflection is, this is something we could talk about in another episode, probably quite in depth, but it's just like that reflection process is a big part of it, right?
Right. Okay, let's talk about something else that might cause people some hesitancy coming out of the gate. And that is comparison to others, especially, I don't want to harp every podcast about the age we live in and the society and social media and things like that.
Don't compare yourself to that Instagram model.
But really, what do we see these days? It is this ultra. So first of all, we all know it's highlight reels of everyone's life. So when you're scrolling through highlight reels, that has to have some sort of an effect on your own psyche that says I'm doing it wrong. But we're all experiencing that as we go through the highlight reels of our friends and loose colleagues. But so other than that, I would say that it's condensed also, and so somebody's big health journey that takes them 6 months to a year, you might see a quick video. So everything's coming very fast, and I think that has an effect on our psyche too, that things should be fast. You just watch somebody's year-long journey in 2 minutes, and then you might watch another one later that day, and you're on week 5 and feeling like things are never going to, get better. Let's say, you're doing a strength routine or a diet, or you're on a new supplement trying to help you alleviate pain, arthritis, or something like that. Like, the thing is, so I just think that right out the gate, you might have this perception that, well, there is something fundamentally wrong with me, because this journey that I'm about to embark on, that I'm even thinking of, it's just going to be so hard, and everyone else makes it look so easy. And the thing is, you're right, they do make it look so easy, because that's part of the game, that's part of the veneer and the shine of social media. And the story But, even for that person that achieves their goal, let's say it's a numerical goal of 30 pounds weight loss, you achieve it, you show the before and after pictures, you get some praise, and then, it's overwhelmingly, there's kind of this, well, now what? That will eventually dissipate. And that's why just having a number in your mind is probably not ideal. We can talk about that maybe later, and that's more like habit building and things like that. And we're just concentrating on getting started today. But yeah, I think that comparison is something that out the gate is causing people to be hesitant.
Yeah, and I think it's also important that people understand that when you see a company who's showing this before and after, this amazing transformation that this client made, they're showing you only like the 1% of the people that they've worked with. Like, there is actual science behind the fact that, not everybody makes that kind of transformation. Right? Really, they're showing you the 1% of the people that went through their program, that, used their services, that made this amazing transformation. They bought in 100%. They went hard for it. Like, not everybody that works with that person or with that company, or everybody that you see on Instagram, not everybody's going to get those types of results in that short of time, or whatever the case might be that you're comparing to. And I think sometimes people look at, let's say, like a company's website, and they see these transformations, they sign up, they start, they're not seeing that same results. They're like, well, Cindy that I saw on your website lost 20 pounds in her first 6 weeks. I've only lost like 2 pounds in my first 6 weeks. Yeah. So, well, Cindy's in the 1% of people who and who knows if Cindy kept that weight off or what? Like, you don't know. If
Cindy even has an overactive thyroid, and there's reasons why their metabolism is abnormally high, and we don't know of the health cost of that person on losing that amount of weight in that amount of time either.
Yeah.
I want to see the before, after, and then the after.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
These pictures should come in threes, and it should be standardized across the board. Let's see the before, let's see the after, and then let's see 12 months after again. Yeah. And now, timestamp them, and now I'll believe you.
That's legitimately something I've thought about doing in my business, is like showing that, like, 2 years from now, where are they at? Because that's something that I pride myself on, is like, I don't care if you can lose 20 pounds in 2 months. I care how you live the rest of your life. How are you able to progress, and how are you able to keep that progress going without me? I don't want you to be with me all the time. I don't want you to have to buy into my program every single time you want to lose weight. I want to see you lose that weight or improve your lifestyle in whichever way you're looking for, and then go on and be like, I got this, right? The same way in martial arts, where it's a big part of it is getting your black belt, but a bigger part of it is like the life that you lead after you've completed that journey. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. In our school, we would talk about providing for your community and giving back quite a bit. It was in our creed, really, and about passing on the lessons that you learned to the junior students and things like that. Yeah, no, I love that. We certainly bring a lot of that forward into our lives today.
So we've kind of harped on the starting, and like kind of where are the problems with starting? Where does that resistance come from? Do we want to talk a little bit about compliance?
Absolutely. So there's two terms here. There's compliance and there's adherence. So adherence, when it comes to, let's say what I do as a naturopathic doctor, adherence is more an agreed upon plan between two parties. So that would be, I develop a treatment plan kind of with somebody's values in mind and in consideration. Compliance is more of a directive. The doctor says you have to do this. You have to take this. It's life or death in some instances. So they're a little bit different, but for our intents and purposes today, we're totally forgiven for using them interchangeably.
Yeah. So just as a quick recap, I don't mean to interrupt you, but so when we're talking about adherence, then we're more talking about like this is like recommended, whereas compliance is more like you have to do this, otherwise there's going to be a direct consequence.
Yeah, and so like that can happen in chronic conditions, for example. There's many different people with different types of value systems within their own medical care. but sometimes there are directives that come down. I don't do it, but from let's say from other professions. And that's more a compliance. So this the reason why we're even talking about this is because there's statistics about compliance rates and adherence rates. So I just thought we'd define that first before I get into some stats.
Yeah, no, that's good. We gotta keep it legit, right?
Okay, cool. Love it. All right, so with adherence, for example, there's been some decent research into why adherence is so low. And again, remember, I'm a patient as well as a doctor, and Kyle is a client, a patient as well as a professional too. So we're not like pointing the finger here. Anything I say, I'm kind of like acknowledging in myself too. So adherence rates are low across the board, across all sorts of health professions. And some of the top reasons, of course, like financial burden of starting a new program or taking a new supplement. This lack of perception that it's working is a really big one too. And I think that most people quit near the beginning when they want to see a linear one-to-one benefit and increase. Some of the other ones were, they weren't even quite sure why they were taking it anymore. I guess that's a pretty good reason to...
Yeah.
This is more kind of in like the supplement drugs world. But yeah, so we got some insight into why people fall off. And then as far as compliance, so that's like, yeah, so across the board, it's pretty close to 50% of patients or clients or people that get prescribed some sort of a plan. It's like 50% or less don't do their homework. And it's just pretty consistent. It's just kind of a statistic, more of a comment on us as human beings than all these various different types of health professions. Because, when you see a pattern like that, it's interesting and it stands out.
Yeah, and it's, I see it in my career path a lot when, especially with massage therapy, when it's like, okay, like your neck is really bothering you. It's been doing this for a while. I want you to do these stretches, do them, this amount of time this week for this, length of time each. And then the next time you see them, hey, how did your stretching go? Is it helping? It's like, haven't really done it. Right. And it's like, okay, well, why? Like, don't you want this problem to go away? And that's kind of what we're going to talk about now is like, why don't we do this? Why is it so hard for us when we want something? We want something so bad. Whether, again, you're wanting to lose weight or get stronger or reduce pain or whatever the case might be, we want to do this thing. We start, why is it so hard for us to stay motivated, to keep wanting to achieve this thing? Like, we want to achieve it, but why is it so hard to do the things that we need to do in order to achieve it?
Yep. I would say part of it could be the complexity of the plan right off the bat. You really have to meet people where they're at.
100%.
And if they're not ready for some sort of multimodal, multi-dimensional treatment plan or whatever it is, to achieve their goal, so that could be discouraging because they might think, geez, I'm in the first phase of this and like I can't keep up.
Yeah.
I'm trying to count my calories, I'm trying to do this and that, and but I just can't keep up. And then the fear starts coming back. I'm just not cut out for it. Yep. Maybe this just, and then before you know it, you're back to square one kind of thing.
Yeah, and you actually just triggered like an interesting thing in my mind of like, a lot of times too, you get this mix of people who are either scared of the complexity or they're craving the complexity, but as the professional looking at it, like the way that you've described your lifestyle, like it's just not set. Like statistically, I just know that you likely won't be able to commit to that just based off of what this person has told me. So I think it's really important that we actually do evaluate our lifestyle when starting something, right? Because that's something that's going to affect your ability to stick to something, to go to the gym 3 days a week. Or this is an example we talked about as well, right? Is, obviously I'm going to use gym examples and stuff, being the strength Sifu and everything. No, but somebody who's like, okay, this is my year, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week and blah, blah, blah. It's like, but then life hits, something happens, you have to go and do take care of your kids, they're sick, or a family member needs you to help move move into your new house or something like that. And that throws a wrench into your plans.
Yeah.
That really affects somebody's long-term psyche as well.
Mm-hmm. And just organizing this podcast and organizing some of the other professional relationships we have together, we're constantly doing this to each other. It's like, hey, like this big thing like just came up. Sorry, we need to reschedule. So like we totally get it.
Yeah.
That happens. Life does get in the way. So then my idea is, so then should there almost be some sort of like a forgiveness budget throughout the year for yourself that you're proactively anticipating missteps happening throughout the year. And this is more, let's say, external environment stuff. At the beginning of the episode, I was talking about internal environment and self-talk and self-defeat, but there's obviously external environment factors as well. So should you give yourself almost like a forgiveness budget throughout the year to say, you know what, it's almost inevitable with the amount of friends I have, the family, the relationships, like people are going to need my help, things are going to happen. And then to not get so down on yourself when you go off of your plan or fall off the wagon a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that can be on a scale too. Like you can look at that and say, just like everything, just like planning and prepping and stuff can be on a real scale of commitment, really, right? Because you can look at that as that person who's looking for that specific plan to actually budget for something like that makes a ton of sense, right? To say like, okay, this is my plan. I'm going to work out 5 days a week, but I know that there's going to be this and this are possible things that are going to get in the way of that. And then you account for that, and that now becomes a part of your plan, right? Whereas if you're not the type of person who likes to have things so detailed and lined out, then maybe it's just a matter of having some more compassion for yourself, right? Maybe it's a matter of just changing your mindset. And I talk a lot about consistency over perfection. Maybe that's where that comes in. It's just a mantra of just remembering, okay, when I do move off the plan a little bit, when I do inevitably miss that one workout or eat more carbs this one day than I had anticipated, or I forget to take my supplement today. When those things inevitably pop up, you can remind yourself and say, hey, this is consistency over perfection. This isn't, this doesn't take away all the work that I did before. This is just consistency over perfection. This is just me. This is also a part of my plan. This is normal, right? And as you got to make sure that those things are normal.
And I've never really heard of that before. Yeah. Like it seems so simple and straightforward and sensical. I haven't heard of that before. I got to start putting that in, those fudge factors or whatever into my own plans for people. I think
100%.
Yeah. Yeah, so that could be one of the reasons why people drop off right off the gate. So I just think tempering expectations is so important. There's so much glitz and glamour out there because that is what sells. But if you're not really attuned to the fact that that's not real life, it is just marketing, it's just a game. Yeah. Then I think it will affect your expectations quite a bit. So as coaches, that's something that we're responsible for is tempering expectations out the gate. And
absolutely.
Then you get to redefine your own success. What does success mean? Success, like right now, so I have difficulty sticking to my meditations, and because life gets in the way, and I get up in the morning and I'm supposed to do this meditation, but like I turn on my phone to, check the weather, and then it's just dinging off, and sometimes there's quasi-emergencies happening, and then the day is just taken off, like a space shuttle, and it's just gone. Yeah. Like, so then, I have to think, well, okay, so if it's not really working, what isn't working about it? And what can I do? And what I've been doing is, like, before I even get out of bed, I just kind of set this silent timer, and it's for a short amount of time. That's the other thing, is like, at least I'm doing something. And so before my feet even hit the ground, and I just do like a 6-minute meditation. Yeah. And I'll admit, do I do every day of even that? I sometimes have a hard time sticking to. But so I temper my own expectations that, I don't have to do an hour meditation. I don't even have to do 20 minutes. I do 6 minutes because that first minute lets me get comfortable and lets me really get present, and then it's like 5 golden minutes of meditation kind of thing. So that's how I kind of temper my own expectations with my own habits that I want to do.
Yeah, and while we're on the topic of expectations, I think another important thing and something that I often ask, actually I always ask with my clients when I first sit down with them is like, okay, this is what you want to achieve. What is your expectation for what that's going to take? Or what is your expectation for how long that's going to take, right? And when you really start to think about that, it kind of forces you to get a real look on things. Or sometimes I have to kind of course adjust them a little bit. It's like, well, my expectation is I'll work out once and I'll lose 20 pounds, right? It's like, well, that's just, factually not possible, right? So you do have to really look at that and say like, okay, well, based off of your lifestyle and the way that it currently is, like, what's your expectation for what you need to adjust in that lifestyle, and how realistic is that? When you look at meditation, waking up first thing in the morning, like for me, if I was to say like, okay, I'm going to wake up first thing in the morning, I'm going to meditate every single day, it's just not realistic for me. Like, it's just not. I've got 3 kids that they're usually waking up before me, usually waking me up with their noise and stuff. And then I have to help get them ready for school. We got to make sure they have breakfast. We got to make sure they got their lunches in their backpack. And then I got to get them to school and all those things. That's not realistic for me in my schedule. That's an important factor too when we're looking at expectations, is like, how much does your lifestyle impact what you want to achieve? And then how do you kind of intertwine that in order to make it something that you can stick to?
Yeah. Yeah, or are people sitting there thinking, I really want to start this thing, but it's going to cause so much inconvenience in my life, but I really want it, but it's, and so, but sometimes there's modifiable and unmodifiable factors, which you're going to hear me talking about quite a bit, but so an unmodifiable factor would be the family situation. But sometimes there are modifiable variables that you have to look at too. But yeah, you can't. So for instance, something that might be modifiable is actually removing something in your life that is not of great consequence. Removing something, some sort of, maybe it's like you just have this hobby of like, well, I'm always binging a show, something like that. Is that can you just be sometimes binging a show? And is that a sacrifice where you could create some more time? And this concept kind of came up when I was thinking about New Year's resolutions and looking at adherence for New Year's resolutions, people's own agreement that they have with themselves and why it's so low. And I just get this impression that most of us, we're always walking around kind of with our cups full of life. Like our schedules and our just energetic capacity, everything's always full. So then when we try to add something else in, the cup's just kind of spilling over. Yeah. And sometimes you have to look at what's modifiable that you can remove. And sometimes there is a sacrificial element to it. Yeah. You have to sacrifice something in order to make something else happen. And that word sacrifice, like, even as I say it, it kind of has a negative connotation to me, even though I know its benefit and its importance.
I would almost rephrase it as like, think of it as a trade-off. It doesn't necessarily have to be a sacrifice.
Trade. Nice and cordial, yes.
Yeah. It doesn't have to always be, and this is coming especially from a parent's perspective, and I actually just posted about this, I think yesterday. But it's like when there are certain lifestyle factors that sometimes create restriction, right? Within trying to achieve something or an expectation to be able to do something. And so for me, it's important to phrase that correctly and say like, okay, well, it's not necessarily me having to take another 20 minutes away from my day, but maybe I can make a trade-off. Maybe I can trade this 20 minutes of this thing that's not serving me well and put this 20 minutes of something that is serving me well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in kind of looking out for those, just be aware of things that you've kind of always done, because those might be the things that you have a blind spot for, that they're not really serving you anymore. And if you're having a tough time and you live with somebody else, ask them to give some reflection to you if you have a good enough relationship, because we do get blind spots about things, and I like to walk around thinking that I don't have blind spots until something gets reflected on me by, let's say, the person that I live with, and then I you're taken back at first, and then if it's coming from a place of honesty from that other person, eventually you go, oh, they're right.
Yeah.
Darn it. Darn it. They're so right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is another topic that we could dive pretty deep into, right? I want to talk a little bit about motivation, and then I want to get into also just giving, I want to actually give some strategies, some things that people can actually take home with them, or take with them out of this episode and say like, okay, I can actually try that, that will actually help me. So motivation, people, this is a good segue using motivation, because people often tell me, well, I'm just not motivated, or I lost motivation. I was so motivated, but then I lost motivation. How do I get that motivation back? And I think that's a big thing. So do you want to start with that? Like, how do we actually look at motivation as a thing that we can actually keep, or is it something that we can keep?
Yeah, motivation can go very deep. Everyone has their various sources of motivation, but it is a tricky topic when somebody starts to lose it. And there's always kind of the first reactions as coaches. It's, well, go back to your why. Can we think about that point? Go back to that point when you were very excited about it and what that meant to you. And then you can kind of look at, well, from that point to this point, has there been something that's happened? Has life gotten in the way? Has your perspective changed? Has the negative self-talk just skyrocketed and catapulted? But you do kind of have to talk about it and figure it out. And then, I would say that there's this other concept that it's not necessarily a good tactic to rely on motivation.
Yeah.
And that's why when you should try to develop systems and have systems in place instead. And so one of the things maybe that you could do, there's habit coupling is one of those things. And so if you already have a habit, if you're already brushing your teeth and you want to keep a budget on a phone, on an app on your phone, it's like every time you brush your teeth, you enter in the things that you spent money on that day. But so that would be so that's like habit coupling. And so what that is, you're developing a system. You're not getting motivated to write down that you went to Thai Express or whatever and spent $8. You're not motivated to do that, but you have a system in place instead, and that helps you kind of keep that going.
Yeah, you're finding something that you can anchor this new habit to, like almost like a habit that's already so solid, like brushing your teeth or grabbing a cup of coffee. Like those are things that for a lot of people, those are solid habits that have been built and are really like in the cement, really. I think what you're talking about is like really trying to like find something like that and anchor this new habit to it. You're almost like you're tag teaming it a little bit, right?
Yeah. So that sometimes works. That's not going to work for everything. Someone says, well, I like what I'm focused on is this new skill. It has nothing to do with brushing my teeth. Okay. So is there something to do with this new skill? Let's say this new skill, you want to learn it, you're having a hard time. You want to learn a new language, you're having a hard time like following through on the online lessons. It was a great idea a few months ago. Is there a way that you can incentivize yourself to come to the table, so to speak? Is there a way that you can make your environment just that much nicer? Put on I always go to the essential oil diffuser because that's what got me through 8 years of school. Because I would create my study space and I would put on nature sounds, put on the diffuser, and just create a really beautiful environment that I saved for studying.
Yeah.
Right. And so you can save your favorite podcasts. Hi-oh for the gym, whatever, and so that would be a way to bundle. I think this is, I got to make sure I'm promoting. I think this was James Clear. He wrote a book on habits and he talks about this stuff.
Yeah.
And
Atomic Habit.
Yeah. So that's where some of this comes from.
Yeah. And it's funny because we think about it this is not some new thing. Like people listen to music at the gym to motivate themselves to push harder. It's just a different type of music, right? Whereas what you're talking about is, I needed time to actually sit down and focus and be able to do this. And so I used this type of music to do that. It's all the same thing. We're just, sometimes we need to think outside the box a little bit, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think people become demotivated because they're either trying to do too much or whatever that they're doing, they haven't adjusted properly to their new body. Maybe they started a routine 5 years ago and your body's changed. And I just think of myself, especially like with running, my runs just started getting bigger and bigger and more to the point where I was doing like 20-kilometer, up and down hills and getting lost on my GPS. And I was like, I wasn't even enjoying it anymore. I would come back. I was like a wreck. I couldn't walk for 2 days.
Yeah.
And so then anytime I was thinking of the concept of going on a run, I would do an eye roll and just think, no, running's hard. Running hurts. And what I realized is that I went way too far away from what I was excited about at the beginning, which was just being able to run 5K without stopping. That's what made me excited before. And then the fitness that I got from it and the change in my lungs and breathing and just my ability to have work throughout the day at various, helping people move or whatever. I could see that change. So yeah, for me, I bring this up because I think that people can become demotivated because maybe they escalate, they do gain skills and they gain more fitness, but then they escalate their workouts more and more and more. And then it's just kind of this crazier thing to uphold constantly instead of little 30, 45-minute boot camps or whatever to help keep you in shape and help keep things fun. So that happened to me. Yeah.
Well, and people are often, and this happens to me all the time, you're always looking for that next thing. What's next, right? You're always looking, okay, I finally achieved this time on my 5K run. What's next? Well, did you stop to celebrate the fact that you achieved that time? Because that's a big part of motivation as well, is celebrating, right? We always think of motivation of gotta do. Well, no, sometimes it's what did I do? What have I achieved? What have I accomplished here? Celebrate that. That's actually going to motivate the hell out of you when you stop and say, look what I actually did. Look what I'm capable of. Now I'm energized and motivated and excited to keep doing more, right? But if we're constantly just saying what more is there left, that's exhausting.
Yep, exactly.
So something that I really believe in terms of keeping motivation or, that debate of are we keeping motivation or, that motivation debate is starting small, first of all. And the reason why I say starting small is not because I don't want you to see fast results or anything like that, but it's because when you start small and you start with things that are almost what I would call easy wins or low-hanging fruit, then you're able to get that celebration a lot easier early in the process when it's the hardest, right? Yeah. Well, I wouldn't even maybe say that that's necessarily the hardest time. There's going to be hard times throughout, but I think based on this conversation with starting and trying to keep up with it, I think it is typically in those earlier phases where people are finding that a lot of that struggle.
Especially when they're looking for results.
Yeah, when they're looking for results early on, right? It's give yourself easy results. Find easy things that you can shoot for. Maybe it's saying okay, I'm just going to do this one thing every single day, but I'm going to celebrate it.
Yep. Yeah. And because I would say that the celebration would be a form of reward, and what is rewarded is repeated, and that's just not just a hokey sentence. That is, it's absolutely true. Whatever we have friction towards or resistance towards, we tend to not repeat, but what is rewarded, we will repeat. So sometimes that reward has to come from yourself.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely, and I've seen it time and time again, with our Wellness Dojo coaching program and stuff like that. This isn't a shameless plug, but okay, maybe it is a little bit. But, through that program, that's a big belief in that program is start small, build off of those small things, but also very similar to in martial arts with our belt levels and stuff. There was times where I wanted to quit, but I was I'm so close to getting that next belt. It's kind of low hanging fruit there. And then it helps me, it almost distracts me away from that big thing. It's I want to lose 100 pounds, right? It's well, if you're constantly focusing on how close am I to losing 100 pounds, for a long time, that's going to look very daunting. And it's going to be, pretty scary, I think daunting is the right word for it.
Yeah.
So give yourself smaller milestones that you can reach for, right? It's the yellow belt, the orange belt, those types of things. This is part of the coaching program that we implemented is giving people, milestones along the way so that they can achieve those things. But that can be done in a lot of different ways. That can be saying okay, first 10 pounds. I'm going to look at the first 10 pounds, or I'm going to look for that. I want to push 10 more pounds on my bench press, or whatever the case might be. I want to get 10 days in a row of eating salad with my dinner, whatever it might be. Set small things that you can achieve, and start with things that you're so confident that you can achieve that there's like failure is not even possible.
Yep. Start that motivation train that way. Start
Absolutely.
that dopamine train, start that motivation train, start that serotonin train. Yeah, exactly. Because you get, and I say train because it's something that it might start up slowly, but eventually you get so much momentum built that it's actually hard to stop. And when you reach that stage, your habits that were once new are part of your systemic life now. Hopefully for the best.
Yeah, 100%. And to bring it all kind of back and bring it all together, I think
Let's start recapping. It's been a really good episode.
Yeah, it has.
We should let's start recapping here.
But going back to what you said of the coach's mindset, we're always going to come back to that why. Well, there's a reason for that, and that's because your why, and I'm talking your deeper why, not I want to lose 10 pounds just because I want to look good. There's more to that. You have to explore that. And that's something that I think we both do at the beginning stages when working with somebody, is like really trying to get to that underlying why. Why are you doing this? Why is this actually so important to you? And a lot of times when people can uncover those things, if you can come back to that through the times that you are struggling or through that workout that you did miss, if you can remind yourself, okay, why am I doing this? Okay, I'm not doing it to hit the gym X amount of days a week. That's not why I'm doing it. So don't worry so much about that. But maybe the reason why you're doing it is because you just want to live a healthier, like you want to avoid the same diseases that your parents had or something. Like maybe that's something. And so when you remind yourself of that, you can look at that and go, okay, well, missing the gym today doesn't really affect that overall why as much as I maybe thought it did if the why was to get to the gym 3 days a week, right? So go back to that original why, and that's oftentimes a real anchoring thing for people to keep going when things are tough.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so just going back a little bit, so and to recap, so you are going to have to take some sort of a leap.
Yep.
And redefine it's scary to it's exhilarating, it's exciting, it fills me full of pride to know that I'm, going to take this leap. So you are going to have to leap when you're starting something eventually, but don't let that feeling be fear. Don't define it as fear. The second, start small, because the unknown can be demotivating. It's like big and as vast as space itself, right? And that's intimidating. And so that's why you have something, instead of looking like through the skies into the cosmos, just start looking down your block. It becomes a lot less intimidating that way. Try to systematize habits instead of just purely relying on motivation. And if you lose your motivation, try to figure out the root cause of why. That might take talking to somebody to figure that out. And then once you've figured it out yourself, share that knowledge with others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to add one thing that we haven't talked about, and it's not something that we have to go deep into at all, but it's, just, you kind of touched on it, but lean on people. Like lean on people for support as well. Like find accountability for those things. You can be getting all the small wins and stuff that you want. You can take that leap. If you're not leaning on people when you feel that you need it, especially, then you're just making it more difficult on yourself. So set yourself up for success. Use people, use whatever you need to use, whatever tools are available to you, and like you will have success. This is a process. Remember the process of this, because the tough times are a big part of that process and an important part too.
All right. So with that said, thank you so much for being with us, everybody. It means a lot to us. We hope you got some great information out of this episode. It was, fun for me to reflect on and put a little bit of research into and see some of those statistics. And then, that helps me moving forward too as a practitioner.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime we sit down and talk about these things, it's helpful for us as well. But hopefully you were able to take something from this episode. Let us know if you were and what it was. And we're looking forward to episode 2.
Awesome. See you then.
See you soon.
Peace.